that is Jenni O'Neill. Jenni, if you'd like to come forward, I'll just tell people a little bit about what you've been up to up there in Gloucester. So we're introducing Jenni. She's a member of the Groundswell Gloucester. This is a group working to stop AGL's plans for a gas field on prime agricultural land that is only a few hundred metres from homes. After what's already been a long battle, this month AGL was given permission by Mining and Energy Minister Anthony Roberts, a local member here, to start fracking for coal seam gas. And the local community is preparing for a blockade to protect their land, water and health. Jenni O'Neill is a mother of two, describes herself as a reluctant activist, volunteer researcher and co-author of Exposing the Risks. Jenni will speak about the politics of CSG in Gloucester and the reality of living in a community divided by coal seam gas mining. Thank you very much, Jenni.
Hi, thank you very much for having me and also for taking that step out of home and coming out to get educated and join with other people. I'm going to talk about an overview of Gloucester, the town and the community, the big picture of AGL's CSG project, specifically what's going on at Walk Ivory with the fracking of the 4 wells, which is imminent, the impact on our community, and finally what you can do. Okay, here are the Buckets Mountains, which surround our town. They're an Aboriginal sacred site. They're part of the gateway to the Barrington Tops, which is a national park. It's only 3.5 hours from here. So it's great for tourism. We have a range of sustainable industries which are thriving in Gloucester. A big part of our economy over the last 2 to 5 years has been the tree changer economy, of which I'm a part. And we've been very fortunate on Groundswell with this tree changer move. We've had a number of retirees, predominantly from Sydney, who have brought their resources, their skills into our community. And on our team at Groundswell, we have a barrister, a geologist, 2 water resources engineers, and others with expertise in politics and council. Here are the major industries for Gloucester. This is from a report compiled for our council by economists at large recently. You can see our top industries are sustainable industries. Mining there will actually be lower now than it was, as due to the drop in coal prices. A mine has ceased operation in the last 6 months. Tourism alone brought in $44 million to our economy last year. Just to get a picture of our town and where we feel the majority of our people are, the Gloucester project started a few years ago. It runs a demonstration market garden, employs trainees, and it has a membership of about 300 people, the largest membership of any group in town. They're focused on sustainable future for Gloucester and keeping our resources and wealth in our region. Okay, big picture of AGL's coal seam gas field. Currently, the imminent issue is Walk Ivory pilot, which is fracking of 4 wells. The stage 1 project is for 110 gas wells that has been approved. The total project involves another 2 stages with a total number of wells of 330. But I note that figure is only indicative. There's no assurance that it'll stick at 330. It could end up being more. The rationale for the project, according to AGL and the government, is the need to secure an independent gas supply from New South Wales. However, along with pineapples, bananas and a whole range of other products, New South Wales has been importing gas for years. BHP's CEO a couple of years ago assured the state of New South Wales that there is enough gas coming out of Bass Strait to supply us for decades to come, and there's no reason that should change. We run a little shop front in Gloucester, and I was in there a couple of weeks ago. I had a compliance officer who had been made redundant from a gas field in Queensland, who had actually been born in Gloucester and he'd come back home. He came into the shop and he said, you know, there's enough gas in Queensland already tapped in for 500 years. So there is no gas shortage, and legislation ensures free trade between states. There is talk of a pipeline that will connect New South Wales to Queensland, whether that's to bring gas down to New South Wales or gas to go out of New South Wales up to Gladesvillle for export, we don't know. AGL has talked about 300 jobs during construction. We believe most of those workers will be brought in from outside. Although that is debated locally, the fact that AGL has at various times talked about having a camp to host their workers suggests that they will be brought in. Post-construction, AGL's estimates of jobs varies from 12 to 35. As you saw in the previous slide, tourism is employing over 200 people, and that's what it is. Here's our perfect storm. The pink here is Gloucester Township. These are residential estates. The northern end of the gas field, 3.5 kilometres from the high school. This is only stage 1. Here's the town of Stratford. Here's an existing coal mine, which is the one that has recently ceased operation, and that's the extension that they have just had before planning. This is another application for an open cut coal mine. This is called the Rocky Hill coal mine. That is currently awaiting determination with the Department of Planning. If that is approved, you can see the northern end of that. I think it's about 1.5 k's from the hospital. And that's a big open cut coal mine. So, as you can see, we're calling that the perfect storm. Okay, I'll just go back one. That one's probably better. As you can see, we have a number of rivers in the area. Part of the reason that it's a great area to be preserved as a food bowl is also the water catchment for 75,000 people in the Manningatari area. If stages 2 and 3 go ahead, you see down here, that then encroaches onto the water catchment for the Karua River, and the Karua River feeds into Port Stephens. So I don't know if you're aware of Port Stephens, just north of Newcastle. Big area for whale watching, dolphins, and an oyster industry there. Okay, Archer, when he was in position, said that stages 2 and 3 were highly problematic in terms of actually getting a go-ahead in that water catchment. We have highlighted that to AGL's investors. We'll see what happens. Okay, 2 kilometre exclusion zones do not apply to Gloucester for the stage 1 project because it was already approved before the 2K zones were introduced. So there is no protection for us at all. The minimum distance from homes is 200 metres for us. Stratford as a village apparently is the only village in New South Wales that will not have the 2 kilometre exclusion zone. Okay, so we'll go on to impacts of the project in a big sort of picture. On the left is what AGL's publication says a gas well looks like. On the right is a picture of a gas drill rig at Forksdale. This is something I only learnt in the last fortnight as well. In some of the documents they talk about the well pads being 10 metres by 10 metres. I believe that upon completion they do come back to 10 by 10, but as you can see the actual area of disturbance and soil compaction when they're coming to do the initial fracking is 100 by 100. And if you multiply that by 330 in a valley that is only 10 kilometres wide, with 2 water catchments, one at either end, you can see the impact could be dramatic. So here's an overview of the basin that we're talking about. 10 kilometres wide, a number of rivers converging. I'll just show you the south end of town and the gas field here. And the Rocky Hill coal mine. With all those rivers, of course, we have a lot of flooding. This is June 2011. This was not a major flood. This is a yearly occurrence, sometimes more than once a year. That is the train line, and just beyond is where the first 4 gas wells are. You can see the gas wells are marked there, 11, 12, 13, 14. So here's the train line that we were just looking at, and there are the gas wells. If I go back one, so there's the train line. There's where those wells were on the map. And again, that was not a major flood, that's a yearly event. This is access to the well sites closed by flooding in February last year. I note that in AGL's application to frack the wells at Gladesvillle, their flood management plan in the first instance was, don't worry, we'll get trucks in there and we'll pump out the returned fracking chemicals so that they don't overflow into the river. I'm serious. Since then, after some representations from us and some agencies, they've upgraded the holding tanks, the holding ponds, to closed steel containers, so at least when the floodwaters come it won't immediately overflow. However, the wells will be underwater and there won't be access. Okay, so the other major issue that we have in Gloucester is the nature of the geology. AGL continually insists that the coal seams are separate from the surrounding geology and from the water sources. This is simply not true. It is not true. Parsons Brinckerhoff has been AGL's major consultant. Some of you will be aware that there are currently issues surrounding Parsons Brinckerhoff consulting reports on the Lane Cove Tunnel in terms of estimates being changed a little to support the applicant's aim. We've long contended that there are issues with Parsons Brinckerhoff's work for AGL. Independent experts have also had serious issues with Parsons Brinckerhoff's work. Okay, one of the reasons is the Gloucester Basin is extremely complex. It's crisscrossed by faults. Each of these faults can act as links between the coal seams and whatever they go through as well. Here's an overview of what the faulting looks like. Here's a photo of a fault. You see this line up here? So that photo is from an open cut coal mine in the south of the basin. I'm informed by the geologist who took the photo that that's actually a relatively minor one compared to the faulting that we have in other areas of the basin. Now, AGL's own peer reviewer, Rick Evans, when he looked at the plans for the Gladesvillle pilot, said, "It is important, although it might not be enough protection, to site gas wells away from faults." Okay, it's really important to site them away from faults. It might not be enough, but just keep them away from the faults. The 4 wells at Gladesvillle intersect several faults. In AGL's own documentation, they intersect several faults. One of those faults outcrops in the base of the Avon River. Now this shows the other problem with Gloucester's geology. Now I'm telling you secondhand from a geologist, which I am not, but apparently these curves here represent folding. There's been a lot of folding in the basin over time. And he showed me with his hands, in some cases in Gloucester you have a rock going like this and one going like this. And in between, I think it's called cleats. All of these geological features, the folds, the folding, are opportunities for migration of gases and fluids and coal seam water. Okay. Actually, before I move on, the other issue we have in the Gloucester Basin is that because of the history of coal exploration and also farming, there are a lot of boreholes, that, a number of which are unmapped, but there are about 3,000 boreholes that go down. So it's almost like a pincushion. Now I know some will say that AGL is going to be doing activity in the lower coal seams, but they have left the door open to go up as high as 300 metres. So a lot of these boreholes do go down that deep. There has already been one incident of a borehole blowout where CSG activity was happening in one place and a borehole in another place started spewing mud and water. In that case, the borehole that blew out was away from homes and agricultural businesses. But in the Gladesvillle pilot's case, we have homes 350 metres away from wells, and we don't know what the connection is going to be when it happens. AGL says that's why they need to do it. The problem with that is, AGL says if we do this in the chief hydrogeologist last week said the Gladesvillle pilot area is the highest risk zone in terms of the faulting issue. However, as their reviewer Rick Evans said, faults behave differently at different times and one fault will behave differently from another fault. So what happens in the Wilk Ivory pilot is not necessarily going to indicate what will happen in another area in the basin. The other issue is, their own reviewers suggested to put 8 monitoring systems in either side of the thrust fault. AGL hasn't put the same number in that he requested, a much lower number. And they're also not monitoring at each level that they'll be doing activity at. Okay, moving on. Produced water, I think a lot of people who are switched on with coal seam gas will know produced water is the coal seam gas water that comes up, laced with heavy metals, toxins and some radioactive activity. Up to now, AGL has been irrigating this water onto crops on the banks of the Avon River. They say that's okay because they've been blending it with fresh water. It's true, it's true. The sea industry worldwide says this is worst practice. Absolutely worst practice is to dump untreated water. If you must irrigate, at least remove salt. But no. The Tiedeman's irrigation site initially called a trial, now they call it a program, in acknowledgement that it's actually not going to give them any information. When it rains more than 25 mils at a time, the runoff catch ponds at the bottom of the site overflow, and that's direct from AGL. Freshwater for dilution has always been an issue for us. We saw the Avon in flood, this is the Avon in dry. So this river system is highly variable. We know they can get water in from elsewhere, but we would contend that that water might be better used for other purposes. When this river dries out as well, if there are toxins and contaminants from the coal seam that have been brought up or have run down into there, it is possible for, as the water evaporates, to get a highly concentrated sludge left over. And then, of course, when the rain comes back, you have a highly contaminated water source that cattle are drinking. And it's in the water catchment for Taree. Okay. AGL sold a crop last November. At that time they tested it for nutrition. We can't see that there was any testing done for levels of heavy metal contaminants. They showed levels close to MTL's maximum threshold limit for what is safe for humans to eat if the animals have eaten that crop. Close to maximum tolerance already for cadmium, bromine and copper. The potassium level is extremely high as well, which is a health risk for the animals. Okay, for stage 1, AGL has now produced a water management program which suggests they'll use reverse osmosis. Reverse osmosis, of course, is much preferable to not treating it at all. However, at this stage, we're not sure how pure the water is going to get. So reverse osmosis, you can remove everything or you can remove some, and we're still not sure how much of the contaminants will be removed. Still no destination for the sludge that's left over. So if they only get the salt out, we still have all the salt to deal with. If they get the salt and the heavy metal contaminants and the other radioactive materials out, we have that to deal with too. They have no destination for it at this stage that we know of. Even if the water is treated to potable quality, if they treat it to the best that they can do it, they've got 2 plans. One is to share it for irrigation or to discharge it into the Avon River. But we almost end up with the opposite problem because the water balance in the reverse osmosis treated water would be different than the water balance that naturally occurs in the river. The other issue we have is the quantity of water that's going to come out of the coal seams is unknown because of the complex nature of the geology. The amount of water that comes up from one well can be quite different to the amount that comes up from another well. Okay, so now we'll go on to air, big picture. On the left, this photo was taken after a blast from a coal mine in the south of the valley, and on the right what it normally looks like. This is one of the gaps we've had for a long time in terms of cumulative impacts. In the assessment process, there is not a consideration of what damage is already present in the environment before you look at what you're going to add on to it. And we have this, it looks beautiful, this inversion layer that we often get in Gloucester. And that's when it's clear. But you can imagine if you have 330 gas wells under there and a coal mine, where are those emissions going to go? Okay, now we'll move on to specifics of fracking at Walk Ivory. We've already talked about the impacts of the faulting and permeability. This is about how well do the rocks in the different layers actually seal. Okay, so if you're pumping through or extracting from one, are you going to be able to keep it within a sealed layer so it's not going into the other layers? Unfortunately in Gloucester, and AGL admits this in their application, where the rocks are particularly leaky and where they're strongly sealed is poorly known at present. And that's AGL's exact words. Permeability, high and low permeability zones are unknown at present. The EPA has issued an environmental protection licence for the Walk Ivory pilot. There are no limits on air emissions in that. We met with them last Friday and said, can you show us where the air emissions limits are? There aren't any. So AGL will be required to report their air emissions. At this stage we believe it's 12 monthly. We still have not been able to find anywhere that says when emissions reach this level you have to stop until they dissipate and see where we go. That might be explained by the meeting we had with the Chief Scientist Review Panel in May, where they said one of the unknowns at the moment is what is a safe level of exposure to gas well emissions. They do not know. The research has not been done to look at what is a safe level, what is a safe threshold for you to breathe of these gases together. New South Wales Public Health has never been consulted and has never put a submission in on any of this in the Gloucester Basin, not for the stage 1 application and not for the Walk Ivory pilot. Chemicals in the fracking fluid include tulsi, which is a biocide, it kills life. The safety data sheet that AGL provides on that says, do not release into the environment, highly toxic, hazardous, can have effects on reproduction. Flowback water, or flowback fluid, is they pump the fracking chemicals and sand down, 187,000 kilograms of sand. Pump it down, they pull it back up together with the coal seam water that was down there. So that's what we call flowback water. And then we have produced water. I'll just go forward. Go forward. Okay. So initially they were going to store that flowback fluid in an open dam on the bank of the river, but as I said, that's now been upgraded. The idea then is that they'll pump it into tankers and drive it out to a licensed facility. Mid-Coast Water and Hunter Water have both refused to take this flowback fluid because they can't deal with it, with the type of contaminants that are there. Also, to our knowledge, there is still no analysis of the toxicity of these chemicals when combined. The EPA asked AGL during the application process to do an analysis of reactions between the fracking chemicals and the coal seam water. So when you put this fluid down and it mixes with the coal seam water, what's the reaction? AGL's response was, we will not do that analysis because it is extremely difficult to do. It's on the website, you can view that yourself. Now, they're going to start extracting the flowback fluid mixed with the coal seam water. At some point, the salt load in that fluid that's coming out will spike, will get higher. They will take that as a sign that all the fresh water that they've pumped in has come out, and then they will call it produced water. Unless something has changed very recently, they will not be doing any analysis to check if any chemicals are remaining in the water that's coming out. The salt spike is sufficient to say, well, now it's mostly coal seam water, not the fresh water we put in with the chemicals. The plan is then they're calling it produced water now, and it will begin being irrigated, blended with fresh water and irrigated back onto that same crop. The irrigation trial or program was approved until July 2014. It expired. But due to the delay in approving the Walk Ivory pilot, it was too late. However, they've been given an extension without further public comment, without extra studies which the EPA asked for. That's been extended now for 6 months. However, the Walk Ivory pilot project is approved for 3 years. So we're not sure what's going to happen if any more produced water is coming out when the Tiedemanns approval expires again. Legal issues. Yep, I'm getting late. Okay. Over the Walk Ivory pilot, I'll speed up a little bit. At the time that AGL applied to frack these 4 wells, there were already existing petroleum wells within 3 kilometres. The regulation is that means they should make a full environmental impact statement, which would include stakeholder consultation, public hearings. New South Wales Public Health would get a say. We'd find out what political donations were being made. As you can see here, we brought this to the attention of the Office of Coal Seam Gas. 2 weeks later, AGL plugged and abandoned the nearest well, which had been productive before and just kept waiting for the licence. We still had no response from the Office of Coal Seam Gas. Time went by, but what's going on? There are still 3 wells. I know you've capped one of them. There are still 3 more wells within 3 kilometres. And as you can see here in July, they changed the regulation. Instead of measuring from the edge of the wells, they now measure from the concentric, I don't know what's called, the geometric centre of the wells, meaning now it's 3.1 k's. So they got out of doing the EIS. Within days of that change to the regulation, Walk Ivory was approved. Okay. From the beginning, we've had issues over process. I'll just let you look through that. The delegation to the PAC, the Director General at the time that the Stage 1 application went through was, I believe, Sam Haddad. He delegated the decision to the PAC on the 18th of August 2008 because a political donation disclosure had been made. That is in print. We cannot find any donation disclosure until 2010, which is the one that we investigated with AGL recently and found that there were a number of breaches surrounding that. We still haven't found out how a delegation was made on the basis of a disclosure that doesn't seem to exist. If it does exist, the Department of Planning certainly can't provide it to us. The delegation meant that the community lost the right to a merits appeal. Okay, fracking was never assessed. It was mentioned in the environmental assessment in brackets, fracking might be necessary, but it was the impacts were never assessed. And again, with the Walk Ivory pilot, with no community consultation, the impacts have never been assessed publicly and openly. That means there are big gaps. If we have a look here, the amount of testing that's actually been done is only 3.6% of the exploration licence. There's so much still unknown about the geology of this basin. Now here's what I want to talk about. There was early entrenchment of AGL. At the time that they put in their environmental assessment and bought the petroleum exploration licence, there were 5 pro-mining councillors on our local council. One of them immediately started employment with AGL as the lands officer. He worked as AGL's land officer, still does today, and continued being a local councillor for another 3 years. At that time, not a lot was known about the risk of CSG, and personally I feel that having a pro-mining council who were networked in the community and with the farmers on the affected land helped AGL to get a foot in the door. It seemed like easy money for the farmers at the time. Now we have AGL buying support, giving out community grants to schools for air conditioners, supporting NAIDOC activities, and various other issues around the town. They're also promoting a new pro-mining group in town called Groundswell Gloucester. Their first meeting was opened by Scott McDonald, MLC, who some of you might know was named in Parliament for receiving a junket trip from Santos CSG company. And then we find him in Gloucester opening up this Advanced Gloucester meeting. Now we find this group advertised on the AGL website. They're also listed as consultants for the new water management plan. Groundswell Gloucester is not on the list of consultants.